We've pretty much all had to face a break from climbing or will face a break from climbing at some point in our climbing career, and this comes with some unique challenges and constraints. Today I'm joined by our mindset coach Flo, and together we're going to talk about how to deal with this potentially difficult situation, but also show you that there's some big positives we can take out of it. How you can turn that frown upside down. My first point is to take a break from climbing as actually an opportunity to do something different with your training. So this is going to depend on if it's a short break or a long break. If it's a short break, quite simply, I would be looking for opportunities to train at home, and we might need to define what training at home will look like for you. But if it's a long break, I actually think this gives you an even bigger opportunity. My example of this is back in COVID when I couldn't climb in the gyms. I actually got really bad elbow tendonitis and I broke my ankle doing outdoor rock climbing. I basically couldn't really do much training at all, but I took the opportunity to seriously master my own flexibility, and that has now transformed my climbing forever and also my coaching practices. And this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for like a stack of injuries giving me the opportunity to do something different. We talk a lot about training our weaknesses, and often when we're able to get to the climbing wall and do a lot of climbing, climbing is always going to be the main focus and the priority, and everything else is kind of a supplement to that. But now is an opportunity to focus on some of those supplemental exercises and really hone in on some weaknesses you might have. So if you want to develop more upper body strength or more flexibility, you can still do that to a great degree with your home training.
An important part of finding the opportunities in these more challenging breaks is having acceptance. And that means we're not resisting the situation, and it allows us to kind of de-stress and see what opportunities we have. And to do that, it's really nice to use metaphors with acceptance. So imagining yourself that your character is in a book and it's a wise hero, and you're seeing what can they learn from this situation, where are they finding their wisdom, and with that you can use those metaphors to help you give that perspective and acceptance rather than pushing the situation away. Without acceptance, it becomes a really frustrating process where we want things to happen, we wish it was different, everything kind of feels more difficult. Whereas with that acceptance, we find more enjoyment in the opportunities, and we find those opportunities like Josh said.
My next point is simply to have some keeping in touch days with your climbing. So this might look like going to the gym whenever the opportunity arises. I see this a lot in some of the clients I work with when they're very busy with business trips, or maybe they're moving house, or they've had their first child. And this is a really hard time to have any predictability in your climbing routine. So my suggestion here is to get to the climbing wall whenever you have the opportunity, but don't try and put any pressure on the structure of these sessions. Purely look at this as an opportunity to keep in touch with the social element or just the movement element of your climbing, the stuff that you really enjoy. The risk here is trying to put some structure around it is only going to increase the frustration you have if you feel like your form is dropping or you're not able to do as much as you normally can do. My final point is to look for almost any opportunity to continue with some form of physical activity or just getting outside. And this applies particularly to someone that's in a forced break from climbing and they're really struggling for any opportunities to keep structure in their training. So this might look in the form of maybe going running, maybe going for hikes outside, or partaking in a slightly different sport. Because I think for a lot of climbers, especially ones that take it really seriously, it's more than just a sport. It can be really wrapped up in our identity, it can be our social life, it can be our only main form of structure within our week outside of our work. So I'd be looking for ways to replace the climbing with something that still aligns with your values and what climbing means to you. So this could be spending time with friends if it's really your main social element in the week, or if it's the structure, can you replace it with running, or if it's getting outside, can you look for ways to walk or again be running outside. I think the physical activity element of it again is just more than for your physical health, but I think it has a huge impact on our mental health as well. So if you find that climbing is completely cut out of your schedule, I think this could be really damaging for some people. So finding ways to keep active can be really important and really beneficial.
My next point builds on what Josh has been saying about aligning with your values. If we can accept difficult emotions, thoughts, feelings around having to take a break from climbing, we can use them to help us identify our purpose and what we find important with our climbing experience. One way that I like to do this is to split this into 3 steps. The first step is identifying those difficult emotions, thoughts or feelings. Say it might be worry about getting weak or just frustration that you can't get to the wall. Once you've identified that, you can use this to find out what really matters to you. Why does feeling weak or worrying about feeling weak matter to you? So for me, it could be because I value growth and improvement. The next step would be to find small actions that I can do that incorporate these values. With growth and improvement being one of my values, how can I find ways that I can still work on these aspects? Can I do more upper body training or find techniques that I can do on the wall that say might not aggravate an injury? Another pain point might be frustration or demotivation because you're just not around your friends, and that's telling you connection is a really important value for you. So getting down to the wall, maybe taking pictures or finding ways that you can still help and support your friends even though you're not climbing. Finding what's important to you in your climbing and using that to drive your motivation comes up a lot in my consultations. So if this is something you want to work on, or any other challenges that you find in your climbing, you can book one of my consultations using the link in the description below.
The next chapter in this journey is getting back to climbing, and this is obviously what we wanted to do, so it's a really exciting time. But that first week back is not without its own challenges, and it can come with some frustrations too. Something that seems to get suggested a lot in this first week back is the question, should I do an assessment or shall I kind of recalibrate my training because this is like the beginning of a new chapter? But I actually think this is probably a really bad thing to do for most people, and that's because for a start, we've had this big dip in training, and if a lot of those variables have kind of gone out of your focus, that first week back and going into what maximal testing can present itself with some risks. And the second thing is, as we get back up to speed slowly over the next few weeks, some of the things you might be testing are going to change pretty rapidly over these few weeks as you get back up to speed, as you start to recruit some strength and some fitness. This makes an assessment of your climbing, whether that's subjective or objective like fingerboard tests and pull-up tests, something that is not very reflective of your true potential in the coming weeks. Therefore, setting any training off of this assessment this early on in the process might not be that relevant in what you're actually capable of. You may also find that being overly critical about assessing your climbing in this first week back after a long break or a stressful break might be quite demotivating or maybe frustrating because you're comparing yourself to your former self. At this point, it's important to be patient with your climbing, which I'll discuss more in my next point.
While we don't want to be doing some testing before we get back into our climbing, setting clear process goals can help us stay focused and present with our current situation. And if we can follow the SMART framework with this can help us be more specific and relevant to where we are right now. So make sure when you are setting your goals that they're specific to where you want to be, but also to your values. Make sure that they're measurable so they can give you constant feedback to know you're on the right step. They should be achievable and realistic based on where you're at now, not where you want to be. And this is really important, especially if you're coming back from injury. This is a really valuable opportunity to make them time-bound within this space of coming back to climbing so that you can stay focused on where you're at now and not worrying about where you need to be. So an example of a process goal could be to repeat each of your warm-up climbs 3 times to improve your movement repertoire. This is specific to your values as it's alongside your value of growth and technique development. It's measurable because you can log it in your log whether you have repeated each climb 3 times. It's achievable and realistic because it's in line with the load that you can manage in these 2 weeks build-up period, and it's something that works well within your warm-up already.
My next point is very much about the practical implementation of periodization and adaptation. When we've had a bit of a forced break from climbing, essentially what's going to happen to our training volume is it's going to decrease because we're doing less. And when we come back to climbing, it's naturally going to increase. What we want to be really careful with is that we're not creating a big trough and then a big peak in our training volume. With this comes one of the biggest risk factors in injury. And of course, we want to get back to climbing in the best way possible. And one of the most important things to do is to mitigate for a potential injury risk. The thing that is in our control now is the amount of training we're doing over this first, second, and third week. With a more long-term outlook, we want to make sure that we are really graduating our return to training. And we can do this in multiple different ways. This is going to be the intensity of our sessions, it's going to be the duration of our sessions, and it's going to be the frequency of our sessions. There is definitely a temptation to sort of hit the ground running and do exactly what we were doing before we had this break from climbing. But we need to try and take a step back and make sure that it's much slower and much more graduated. If you've had a long break from climbing, the chances are you're not going to be performing quite at the same level you were before, and so dropping the intensity is an obvious thing that you're going to want to do in your climbing. If you can acknowledge this and set this as part of your training early on, then it will stop you from getting too frustrated with the fact that you're maybe not climbing the same difficulty you were before. This is where being patient comes into it, knowing that you will get back to there, but actually it's an important part of the process for you to slowly build up to that over the weeks and months.
As Josh has said, it can be frustrating if we're comparing ourselves to our past performances. What can really help is if we are able to diffuse from our thoughts, to give ourselves distance between what we're thinking and where we are. If we're able to see thoughts as thoughts or products of the mind rather than things of who we are, it gives us more control where we want to place our attention onto more helpful areas of thinking. One way to do this, and it might seem a little bit silly, is to give your mind a name. This separates your thoughts from you. It creates that distance and loosening that emotional tie so we can process those thoughts more objectively.
Flo, you're so weak at the minute. Everyone else is climbing way harder than you.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate you helping me trying to get strong, but I've got a process for this. I know it's going to take time and I've got a plan.
The next chapter in this journey is going to happen some weeks down the line, maybe months even, and this is when we're starting to get back up to speed and we kind of feel like our normal self again in our climbing. However, my first point is going to be that we need to now look for ways to make consistency in our training. It's pretty common to feel like this rise in progress and return to form means that we need to keep our foot on the gas and keep pushing forwards. However, at this point, we need to remember that we want to consolidate our training and look for consistency over the months and years and not just within the weeks. The point I made previously about trying to avoid these peaks and troughs in training is still valid at this stage, and it can feel like we want to keep with the momentum and keep pushing harder as we start to achieve maybe the same grades or the same strength metrics we were achieving before our break from climbing. This can be in the form of a training plan, or quite simply, you can just be reflective of the amount of climbing and the intensity of climbing you're doing at the moment, and making sure that you kind of stay the course of it and end up in this overtraining mentality, which often forces people to get injured and take breaks from climbing in the first place.
Now you're back up to speed, back into your climbing, it's a really good opportunity to reflect back on that challenging time of having to take a break, remembering what values you did identify and really making sure that you're bringing them back into your climbing and using this to motivate you with your sessions.
If you've unfortunately been forced into a break from climbing for whatever reason, you might find home training tools become your best friend. And right now we've just launched our new MX Edge Switch. This takes our MX Edge design and adds it to a portable hangboard, which is going to offer more versatility for your home training or taking to the crag as a warm-up tool. The biggest benefit for you with the MX Switch is it's got a huge amount of versatility. You can still use this middle edge for our testing and training assessment tools. You can use it for two-arm training as well, so you can hang this up at the crag for warming up. You can also attach it to a band and do finger curls, which is for me my favorite way of warming up my fingers before climbing. And if you want to train multiple grip types, 3 fingers works amazing in the center, and it's got 2 finger pockets on each side with a big radius, so super comfortable. The quality of the wood and the machining on these boards is absolutely amazing. If you want to pick one up, there's a link in the description below. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.